to the regional and international connectivity. I would like to ask some comments from speakers or also from floors in this case.
Actually, thank you. And very important, the domestic, transportation policy, very important, and how we, take the domestic transportation challenges before coming to the regional, international. But sometimes, I think both can go in parallel track sometimes, and learning from each other, particularly here in ASEAN and India, because we have Singapore is the best case. So which can be taken in terms of running the infrastructure, managing infrastructure. So when you draw the policies, we can have go in some issues in parallel. Some are national first, then spill over to the regional and international. I think that could be my personal view. Thank you.
No, I think these are issues really in terms of the pattern of economic development, let's say affecting different regions or different sub-regions within a country or in the wider Indo-Pacific region. So I think this is really a fit area where there can be a lot of cooperation between not only amongst the ASEAN member states, because you already have an economic community, so therefore it's easier. But for example, for India, I'm quite sure, Professor Day talked about cabotage, relaxation of cabotage rules, but you're a little selective about that, because cabotage rules also, they represent certain interests at that time, economic interests. So if you start relaxing, then you actually have a certain backlash, domestic backlash. So you have to actually be a little more calibrated about that and perhaps not go strictly in terms of reciprocity, but to see as to where there is a national requirement where this kind of infrastructure or the service infrastructure or logistic infrastructure needs to be developed. And give that priority, So there are ways in which this can be encouraged through, let's say, the proper policies at the national and the provincial, regional level. So I think it really would have to be part of that. But you're quite right. For example, the case of western area of Indonesia, perhaps they could be more integrated within the regional economic let's say, system. And that also is actually work in progress. So I think a lot of these policy issues would need to be supplemented through this kind of cooperation and fleshed out. And of course, infrastructure for that is quite important. Thank you.
True. Thank you very much. Yeah, we really have to strengthen and realize the cooperation. Some demands can be induced by the supplies, and some barriers can be addressed by these harmonizations, and also we can move forward then to more advanced connectivity. Dr. Nguyen, you have something to say on this? No, thank you. Is there any? Yeah, from fellow from Vietnam, please. Here in the front.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair. Yeah. I have one comment on the maritime connectivity. In fact, as the logistics problem, I think that in reality, even underdeveloped area, there's products that can be shipped to developed area. That is the most important problem is the information. How can we gather the information? How can we have the information? And if the blue economy can be most effectively developed, if we have good information system, innovative information system, so that can be deal with the domestic and also international cooperation. So I think that for the maritime cooperation, So we can cover from the security, safety, and the information sharing system. That one can be applied to the one country and to the regional scale and between India and ASEAN. And we can we can most effectively use our resources for blue economy development in terms of maritime transport. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much. One short comment from Prabhudev.
I'm sorry, I'm Vutanka from Vietnam. Thank you.
Madam is there. I'd like to take up the time.
Yeah, please do so.
Good morning. I'm Helen De La Vega. I'm the Assistant Secretary for ASEAN Affairs in the Department of Foreign Affairs of the Philippines. I think what I would just like to share is basically the context of how we look at maritime connectivity and sustainable development. I think what I wanted to share with our group here is the fundamental characteristic of us in ASEAN, and that is the diversity. Diversity in terms of development, of outlooks, and so even the way we relate to each other in terms of the physical connectivity, as the chair has mentioned earlier. So because of this, it affects the way we look at the harmonization of our laws. For instance, I can say that in the case of the Philippines, while all of us in ASEAN have placed our support to sustainable development in the UN, we all know that individually as member countries, we don't know to what extent that sustainable development issue is being cascaded in our individual countries. For instance, in the case of the Philippines, sustainable development within the context of blue economy is still an evolving one. Why? Because when we look at sustainable development, it is more being viewed as land-based sustainable development and not the sea. And of course, the other complicating factor for the Philippines is because we're a claimant country to the South China Sea, and so we have other dimensions or dynamics to look at. The chair has just mentioned about one particular example of connectivity, physical connectivity between Philippines and Indonesia. And I must say it's quite unique in the sense that it was not driven by market. It was driven by the political resolve of two leaders, Pao Widodo and President Duterte, in April to push for this RORO, the RORO or the roll-on-roll-off project affecting Bitung in Indonesia and Philippines. And so we're looking at it from a different lens. We made the political push at the political, at the leaders level so that we can demonstrate to our constituents in that area that we can make it happen. So as Ambassador Kumar said, I think there are many ways of looking at these things. And I think we have to remain positive about it because I think that there's no other option really but to strengthen economic integration, especially in the kind of circumstances that we face right now when it can be that the next fallout will be Southeast Asia because of the trade tensions and frictions happening between the United States and China. And so when I was looking at, for instance, the strength, for instance, of the maritime economy, of maritime trade, then I again remembered what the leaders decided in Manila last year when it was decided that this year RCEP should be concluded. And so therefore, in a way, that decision of our leaders, and including India for that matter, playing a very important role, is in a way very helpful and will be conducive to moving that maritime trade as well. Because we're not just looking at trade in goods on land, but also, as we all mentioned, that 90% of the trade is happening on the global oceans. So thank you.
Thank you very much for a very insightful share from the Philippines. And maybe we have 1 minute if you have some comments, last comments. No? Yeah. Dr. Nguyen? No? Yes.
Comments, yes, so I think in our region, especially in South China Sea, and the ASEAN. So environment issue, political issue, economical issue, and the blue economy, sustainability in the sea, not separate, not separate. So I think the policy to improve the ASEAN and India maritime connectivity and the blue economy have to focus and apply the holistic and integrated approach. If not policy in the separate, focus only the maritime trading and not respect to the environment. For example, in South China Sea, it is environment, it is the political. Destroy coral reef for a military base, it is the political. But the impact very long term and the permanent impact to the fishery, not only in the ASEAN and also in the China, for example. So cannot separate.
Thank you.
Just take thank you. I think for both the questions, really, I could just make one comment that yes, physical connectivity is important, but we also have digital connectivity. So that's one way in which we can actually overcome the deficit that we face in physical connectivity. And basically, it is sharing information, getting to know what's happening where, and people to know what the opportunities are. And the example, madam, which you gave actually is quite right. I think the political push is really important because even now economic activities are being carried out in the ocean and the sea resources and that sort of thing, because economic activity is taking place, there are stakes in that, but it's the political will which actually will make the current users of those resources realize that actually in sustainable use of ocean resources, there is much more benefit in the immediate term and the long term. And lastly, RCEP, of course, we are all committed, but I will also say at the same time that the FTA, India-ASEAN FTA and services investment is low-hanging fruit. We have it immediately. As soon as it comes into force, you'll see the effect of it on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Let's give some applause for our prominent speakers and also the floors. And we conclude these sessions, and I give the stage to the MC.
Thank you, Chair. We quickly move on to the session 2, Technology in Aid of Blue Economy. May I invite Chair Dr. Adina Binti Kamaruddin, Deputy Director General, Maritime Affairs Department, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Malaysia, to the dais, please.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good afternoon. We are now, in a way, rushing against time before we break for lunch, but that does not mean that we are not here to recognize the presence of two distinguished speakers. I'm very fortunate to be in the middle of them. For an art and law student, I'm in the middle of scientists. So I hope I can make sense of their insights today and all of us as well. So we have on my right Dr. Prakash Chauhan, who is the Director, Indian Institute of Remote Sensing, ISRO, Department of Space, Government of India, Dehradun. He has a very good resume, and one of it, which I heard was where I read, he has published more than 100 research papers in both national and international journals, and also awarded the prestigious Prishorati Memorial Award for his research in remote sensing. And on my left, I have Dr. M.A. Atmanan. Is that correct? Yeah, he's the director of National Institute of Ocean Technology from Chennai, and he's no less distinguished as well, who's done pioneering work in the area of deep sea technologies, and he and his team he led a team to design and develop underwater crawler for a deep sea operation, and he is the seabed man, I would say. So we have now the space scientists and the ocean scientists. We're good to go. I'm just in the middle, the land. So this particular session is looking at how we can harness the aid of technology in the development of blue economy. And with any new sustainable or alternative model, there is always the important role of technology, especially in research, capacity, and also information. I read somewhere in my research that spatial information as enabler of blue economy. More data are represented by maps, but maps also, I think, needs another dimension to it, which is the real-time and real-world processing to understand, and especially with many challenges. So without further ado, I would like to invite the first speaker, Dr. Chow Han. He's given about 15 minutes, and the floor is yours. Thank you.